Join me today as we pay our respects at our nation's most sacred shrine, Arlington National Cemetery. It is the final resting place of over 400,000 of America's military personnel and families, a number of Supreme Court justices, and 2 presidents. It is a must-see for student tours, and in this series I will show you the cemetery through this lens as we see what they see when I guide them. We will visit the graves of President John F. Kennedy and his brothers, see the changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier, spend time at the Memorial Amphitheater, investigate individual graves, and walk through its grounds. It is a magical space where even the most quiet of my student groups become filled with curiosity and questions, and I will share what I know with you as well as give a behind-the-scenes view of the trips. Take a look at the black sign on the way in, the one that says, "Conduct yourself with quiet dignity and respect at all times." Remember, these are hallowed grounds. This is one of the main paths in the cemetery. This is Roosevelt Drive, and here is a map. Arlington National Cemetery is my favorite place to come on a student trip, and it doesn't matter what the trip is, what they have on their schedule. Anything I've ever done with a student trip in this DC metro area, this is my #1 favorite place. And the main reason is because it is so calm and peaceful out here, like it is at this moment. I just love coming here. So as we're walking through the cemetery, it's important to make stops along the way so the rest of the group can catch up. Some of the kids, they stay right at my side as we're walking, but others and some adults, it takes them longer and they're at the back. So we always have to make stops to make sure everyone can catch up. But also, just as importantly, I want to talk to them about what's going on at the cemetery. So this is one of my favorite places to stop. There are 2 things I like to cover here, and right at the very top, you can see Arlington House. So this was the home of Robert E. Lee. And down in front of us, we see the distinctive headstones that you find at national cemeteries. And there's one in particular I like to point out because of what it says on the headstone. This grave right in front of us, it says William G. Windridge. And I tell the kids that there is a lot of information you can learn just by looking at the front of a headstone. So we can tell here that he was Christian. There's a cross at the very top. We have his name. He was a Medal of Honor winner, and you can see the insignia of the Medal of Honor there. He was a staff sergeant. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps. He served in the Korean War. He was born May 14th, 1921. And died on December 2nd, 1950. And I will ask them if they know when the Korean War started. And maybe we had already visited the Korean War Memorial, so we may have possibly covered this. But it started in 1950. So he died in December 1950. He was killed in combat. And then I will tell them, it depends how much time we have, but I will tell them more about how the cemetery came to be, where there are all of these white headstones. Now, as we get to deeper parts of the cemetery, you will see that the graves are all kinds of shapes and colors and sizes and styles. But over here, they're all white. They're all the same. And the reason for this is because in the early days of the cemetery, there were no regulations on what a grave could look like. But as time passed, there started to become issues of space. So when you're running out of space, what do? There are a few different things, but one of them is to make the graves smaller and closer together. And also, you can have multiple family members buried under one headstone. And right over here, there's an example. There are examples all over, but I'll show you one that's right here. So here is the back of a grave, and it says Eliza, his wife. And on the other side is the serviceman's information. One of my sets of grandparents are actually buried this way. My maternal grandfather, he was a colonel in the Army during World War II, and he is buried in a national cemetery in Kentucky that looks pretty much like this one, but much smaller. And his information is on one side, and my grandmother's information is on the other side. And just next to Eliza here, it says, Jacqueline C., loving wife, forever in our hearts. And this you can see all over the cemetery. And some of these other graves behind it, you see they're basically blank. So that means it's only the servicemen buried here. Children under the age of 21 can also be buried this way. So sometimes you have headstones that are complete families. You'll have the servicemen, the spouse, and children all under the same headstone. We're just a little bit closer up now. And how exactly did these headstones get this specific shape and color? So what happened was after the Civil War and during the Civil War, when they were buried, there were scarce resources around to make headstones. So they were made out of wood. They would make these kind of low quality headstones out of cheap wood that was available, and they would whitewash it, and that would be basically the headstone. And they would write the names and regiments, whatever kind of information on these wooden boards. And as you'd expect, it didn't take long for the writing to wear off, where you couldn't really read it anymore. And it wasn't long after that where the wood itself would start to deteriorate. So starting in the 1870s, they began making the headstones out of marble. They kept the same basic shape and size. They rounded off the tops to make it look a bit nicer and made it out of marble. So that's really how it got this shape. And for a very long time, the information on the front was chiseled in, but now they actually use lasers to get it to look even sharper. This is a pretty massive cemetery. It's about 600 acres. It originally was about twice the size, but over time it kind of became this size. But there is actually a national cemetery out in California that is twice the size. It's about 1,200 acres. And there's another national cemetery that is also in Virginia, although on the other end of the state, that only has 22 people in it. I've actually been there. I used to live in that area, and I was part of a hiking group, and we did this hike in that area, and it took us maybe 10 minutes to go through there. This is the pathway up to President John F. Kennedy's grave, and we will always make sure to visit JFK's grave, and also the tomb of the unknown soldier and the changing of the guard. And which we do first really depends on our timing. So right now it is the fall, which means that the changing of the guard happens once an hour at the top of the hour. In the spring, it'll happen every 30 minutes. So we have to time things in a way to make sure we get up to the tomb a little bit early so that we can get a good spot to watch it. So whether we go to Kennedy first or to the tomb first depends on the timing. And I never make that decision until we start actually walking through the cemetery. So we never know exactly how long it's going to take to get through security. And then sometimes some people need to use the bathrooms and we need to wait for them to come back. So we just don't know exactly when we're going to start moving. But once we're actually going through the cemetery, then I can make that decision on which to do first, depending on our timing. But right now, we are going to make our way towards President Kennedy. But before that, I want to show you the house on the hill. That is Arlington House back there.